The hour is long since past. I apologise, I'm late today, but something odd is going on with, well, for those of you who aren't familiar, I should probably say, a big part of my job down here is sorting through the books to pick out the ones that is normal from the ones that is, strange. And I thought that today's books were normal, but, I think there might have been something strange about one of them, given this. It's odd floating here, above it all, detached from the world. It's, well, it's not unpleasant, I suppose, but I don't really feel real, I suppose, I'd say. Don't really feel much of anything. No hunger, no thirst. So that's nice. That's nice. Lamp says he can fix this. Says he can put me back in a body. Said I didn't even need to do tonight, but I mean, why not, really? Right? Why anything, really? So anyway, hello chap. We're going to read a book today. We're going to read a book. The Signalman by Charles Dickens. There's something I'm supposed to say here, isn't there? Something about any questions, if you need me to repeat something, or there's something I'm supposed to say, isn't there? I think so. I'm just not sure, really. It all feels so distant, so unimportant. So anyway, The Signalman by Charles Dickens. Hello, below there. When he heard a voice thus calling to him, he was standing at the door of his box, with a flag in his hand, furled round its short pole. One would have thought, considering the nature of the ground, that he could not have doubted from what quarter the voice come. But instead of looking up to where I stood on top of the steep curtain cutting nearly over his head, he turned himself about and looked down the line. There was something remarkable in his manner of doing so, though I could not have said for my life what. But I know it were remarkable enough to attract my notice, even though his figure was foreshortened and shadowed down in the deep trench, and mine were high above him, so steeped in the glow of an angry sunset that I had shadowed my eyes with my hand before I saw him at all. Hello, below! From looking down the line, he turned himself about again and, raising his eyes, saw my figure high above him. Is there any path by which I can come down and speak to you? He looked up at me without replying, and I looked down at him without pressing him too soon with a repetition of my idle question. Just then there came a vague vibration in the earth and air, quickly changing into a violent pulsation, and an oncoming rush that caused me to start back as though it were forced to draw me down. When such vapour as rose to my heart from this rapid train had passed me and was skimming away over the landscape, I looked down again and saw him refurling the flag he had shown while the train went by. I repeated my inquiry. After a pause, during which he seemed to regard me with fixed attention, he motioned with his rolled-up flag towards a point on my level, some 200 or 300 yards distant. I called down to him, "All right," and made for the point. There, by dint of looking closely about me, I found a rough zigzagging descending path notched out, which I followed. The cutting were extremely deep and unusually precipitate. It was made through a clammy stone that became oozier and wetter as I went down. For these reasons, I found the way long enough to give me time to recall a singular air of reluctance or compulsion with which he had pointed out the path. When I come down low enough upon the zigzag descent to see him again, I saw that he was standing between the rails and the way by the train had passed, in an attitude as if he were waiting for me to appear. He had his left hand at his chin, and the left elbow rested on his right hand, crossed over his breast. His attitude was one of such exasperation and watchfulness that I stopped a moment, wondering at it. I resumed my downward way, and, stepping out upon the level of the railroad and drawing nearer to him, saw that he was a dark, sallow man with dark beard and rather heavy eyebrows. His post was in a solitary and dismal place as ever, I saw. On either side, a dripping wet wall of jagged stone, excluding all view but a strip of sky. The perspective one way on the equipped prolongation of this great dungeon, the short perspective in the other direction terminating in a gloomy red light, and a gloomier entrance to a black tunnel, in whose massive architecture there were a barbarous, depressing and foreboding air. So little sunlight ever found its way to this spot that it had an earthly, deadly smell, and so much cold wind rushed through it that it struck chill to me as if I had left the natural world. Before he stirred, I were near enough to him to have touched him. Not even then removing his eyes from mine, he stepped back one step and lifted his hand. "This were a lonesome post to occupy," I said, and it had riveted my attention when I looked down from up yonder. A visitor was a rarity, I should suppose. Not an unwelcome rarity, I hoped. In me he clearly saw a man who had been shut up within an narrow limits all his life, and who, being at last set free, had a newly awakened interest in these great works. For such a purpose I spoke to him, but I am far from sure of the terms I used, for beside that I am not happy in opening any conversation, there was something in the man that daunted me. He directed a most curious look towards the red light near the tunnel's mouth, and looked all about it as if something were missing from it, and then looked at me. That light were part of his charge. What was it? He answered in a low voice, "Don't you know it is?" The monstrous thought came into my mind as I perused the fixed eyes and the step-line face. This were a spirit, not a man. I have speculated since whether there may have been infection in his mind. In my turn I stepped back, but in making the action I detected his eyes with some latent fear in me. This put the monstrous thought to flight. "You look at me," I said, forcing a smile, "as if you had a dread of me." "I were doubtful," he returned, "whether I had seen you before." "Where?" "Oh, that's not me. It's the book, Garvey. We are all ghosts now, all of us. None truly here. None may be manifest upon the earth. But Lamp says he'll fix it in time." "In time." "I was doubtful," he returned, "whether I had seen you before." "Where?" He pointed to the red light he had looked at. "There," I said. Intently watchful of me, he replied, but without sound, "Yes." "My good fellow, what should I do there? However be that as it may, I never was there, you may swear." "I think I may," he rejoined. "Yes, I'm sorry I may." His manner cleared like my own. He replied my remarks with readiness, and in well-chosen words. Had he much to do there? Yes, that was to say, he had enough responsibility to bear, but exactness and watchfulness were what were required of him, and of actual work, manual labour, he had next to none. To change that signal, to trim these lights, and to turn its iron handle now and then, was all he had to do under the head. Regarding those many long and lonely hours of which I seemed to make so much, he could only say that the routine of his life had shaped itself into that form, and he had grown used to it. He had taught himself a language down there, if only known to it by sight, and had formed his own crude ideas of its pronunciation, could be called learning it. He had also worked at fractions and decimals, and tired little algebra, but he was and had been a boy, a poor hand at figures. Were it necessary for him, when on duty, always to remember in a channel of damp air, and he could never rise into the sunshine from between these hard stone walls. That depended upon time and circumstance. Under some conditions there would be less upon the line than others, and the same held good as to certain hours of the day and night. In bright weather he did choose occasions for getting a little above these lower shadows, but being at all times liable to be called by his electric bell, and at such times listening for it with redoubled anxiety, the relief were less than I would suppose. He took me into his box, where there were a fire, a desk for an official book in which he had to make certain entries, a telegraphic instruction with its tile face and needles, and the little bell of which he had spoken. On my trusting that he would excuse the remarks that he had been well educated, and I hoped I might say without offence, perhaps educated above that station, he observed that instances of slight incongruity as such wise would only be found wanting among large bodies of men, and he had heard it were even so in workhouses, in the police force, even in that last desperate resource, the army, and that he knew it was so much more or less in any great railway staff. He had been, when young, if I could believe it, sitting in that art he scarcely could, a student of natural philosophy, and had attended lectures, but he had run wild, misused his opportunities, and gone down, and there risen again. He had no complaint to offer about that. He had made his bed, and he lay upon it. It were far too made to make another. Far too late. Far too late. Far too. Where are we? What are we? The book, right, the book. The book is what matters. All that I have here conducted, he said in a quiet manner, with his grave dark regards divided between me and the fire. He threw in the word sir from time to time, and especially when I referred to his youth, as though to request me to understand that he claimed to be nothing but what I found him. He was several times interrupted by the little bell, and had to read off messages and send replies. Once he had to stand without the door and display a flag as a train passed and make some verbal communication to the driver. In the discharge of his duties I observed him to be remarkably exact and vigilant, breaking off his discourse at a syllable and remaining silent until what he had to do were done. In a word, I should have set this man down as one of the safest of men to be employed in that capacity, but for the circumstance that while he was speaking to me, he twice broke off with a fallen colour, turned his face towards the little bell when it did not ring, opened the door of the hut, which were kept shut to exclude the unhealthy damp, and looked out towards the red light near the mouth of the tunnel. On both of those occasions he come back to the fire with the inexplicable air upon him, which I had remarked, without being able to define, when we were so far asunder. Said I, when I rose to leave him, "You almost make me think that I have met with a contented man." I'm afraid I must acknowledge that I said it to lead him on. "I believe I used to be so," he rejoined in the low voice in which he had first spoken. "But I am troubled, sir, I am troubled." He would have recalled the world if he could. He had said then, however, and I took them quickly. "With what? What is your trouble?" "It is very difficult to impart, sir. It is very, very difficult to speak of. If ever you make me another visit, I will try to tell you. But I expressly intend to make you another visit. Say, when shall it be?" "I go off early in the morning, and shall be on again at 10 tomorrow night, sir." "I will come at 11. He thanked me and went out the door with me. "I'll show my white light, sir," he said in his peculiar low voice, "till you have found the way up. When you have found it, don't call out, and when you are at the top, don't call out." His manner seemed to make the place strike colder to me, but I said no more than "very well." "And when you come down tomorrow night, don't call out. Let me ask you a parting question. What made you cry hello below there tonight?" "Heaven knows," said I. "I cried something to that effect." "Not to that effect, sir. Those were the very words. I know them well." "I admit those were the very words. I said them, no doubt, because I saw you below." "For no other reason?" "What other reason could I possibly have? You had no feeling that they were conveyed to you in any supernatural way?" "No." He wished me good night and held up his light. I walked by the side of the down line of rails, with the very disagreeable sensation of a train coming behind me, until I found the path. It reached a mountain to descend, and I got back to my inn without adventure. Punctual to my appointment, I placed my foot upon the first notch of the zigzag next night, as the distant clocks were striking 11. You were waiting for me at the bottom with his white light on. "I have not called out," I said, when we come close together. "May I speak now?" "By all means, sir." "Good night, then, and here's my hand." "Good night, sir, and here's mine." With that we walked side by side to his box, entered it, closed the door, and sat down by the fire. "I have made up my mind, sir," he began, bending forward as soon as we were seated, and speaking in a tone but a little above a whisper, "that you shall have to ask me twice what troubles me. I took you for someone else yesterday evening. That troubled me." "That mistake?" "No, that is someone else." "Who is it?" "I don't know." "Like me?" "I don't know. I never saw the face. The left arm is across the face, and the right arm is waved, violently waved, this way." I followed his action with my eyes, and it was the action of an arm gesticulating with the utmost passion and vehemence. "For God's sake, clear the way." "One moonlight night," said the man, "I was sitting here when I heard a voice cry, 'Hello, below there.' I started up, looked from the door, and saw this someone else standing by the red light near the tunnel, waving as I just now showed you. The voice seemed hoarse with shouting, and it cried, 'Look out, look out,' and then again, 'Hello, below there, look out.' I caught up my lamp, turned it on red, and ran towards the figure, calling, 'What's wrong? What has happened? Where?' It stood just outside the blackness of the tunnel. I advanced so close upon it that I wondered at its keeping the sleeve across its eyes. I ran right up at it, and had my hand stretched out to pull the sleeve away when it was gone." "Into the tunnel?" said I. "No. I ran on into the tunnel 500 yards. I stopped and held my lamp above my head and saw the figures at a measured distance, and saw the wet stains stealing down the walls and trickling through the arch. I ran out again fast as I had run in, for I had a mortal abhorrence of the place upon me, and I looked all round the red light with my own red light, and I went up the iron ladder to the gallery atop it, and I come down again and ran back here. I telegraphed both ways. An alarm has been given. Is anything wrong? The answer coming back both ways. All well." Resisting the slow touch of a frozen finger tracing out my spine, I showed him how that this figure must be a deception of his sense of sight. Now that figure originating in disease and death, the delicate nerves that minister to the functions of the eyes, were known to have often troubled patients, some of whom had become conscious of the nature of their affliction, and had even proved it by experimentation on themselves. "As to an imaginary cry," said I, "do but listen for a moment to the wind in this unnatural valley while we speak so low, and to the wild harp it makes of the telegraph wires." "That were all very well," he returned, after he had sat listening for a while, "and he ought to know something of the wind and the wires. He was so often passed along winter nights there, alone and watching." But he would beg to remark that he had not finished. I asked his pardon, and he slowly added these words, touching my arm. "Within 6 hours after the appearance, the memorable accident on this line happened, and within 10 hours the dead and wounded were brought along through the tunnel over that spot where the figure had stood." A disagreeable shudder crept over me, but I did my best against it. "It were not to be denied," I rejoined, "and this was a remarkable coincidence, calculated deeply to impress his mind. But it were unquestionably that remarkable coincidence did continually occur, and they must be taken into account in dealing with such a subject. Though to be sure I must admit I added, for I thought I saw that you were going to bring objection to bear upon me, men of common sense did not allow much for coincidence and making ordinary calculations of life." He again begged to remark that he had not finished. I again begged his pardon for being betrayed into interruptions. "This," he said, again laying his hand upon my arm and glancing over his shoulder with hollow eyes, "was just a year ago. 6 or 7 months passed, and I had recovered from the surprise and shock, when one morning as the day were breaking, I, standing in the door, looked towards the red light and saw the spectre again." He stopped with a fixed look at me. "Did it cry out?" "No, it was silent." "Did it wave its arm?" "No. It leaned against the shaft of the light with both hands before the face, like this." Once more I followed his action with my eye. It were an action of mourning. I have seen such attitude in stone figures on tombs. "Did you go up to it?" "I came in and sat down, partly to collect my thoughts, partly because it had turned me faint. When I went to the door again, daylight were above me, and the ghost were gone." "But nothing followed? Nothing came of this?" He touched me on the arm with his forefinger twice or thrice, giving me a ghastly nod each time. "That very day, as a train came out of the tunnel, I noticed at a carriage window on my side what looked like a confusion of hands and heads, and something waved. I saw it just in time to signal the driver stop. He shut off and put his brake on, but the train drifted past here 150 yards or more. I ran after it, and as I went along I heard terrible screams and cries. A beautiful young lady had died instantaneously in one of the compartments, and were brought in here and laid down on this floor between us." Involuntarily I pushed my chair back as I looked from the boards at which he pointed to himself. True, sir. Precisely as it happened, so I tell you. I could think of nothing to say to any purpose, and my mouth was very dry. The wind and the wire took up the story with a long lamenting wail. He resumed. Now, sir, mark this, and judge how my mind is troubled. The spectre come back a week ago. Ever since it had been there now and again by fits and starts. At the light? At the danger light. What does it seem to do? He repeated, if possible, with an increased passion and vehemence, that former gesticulation of, for God's sake, clear the way. Then he went on. I have no peace or rest from it. It calls to me for many minutes together in agonized manner. Below there, look out, look out. It stands waving at me. It rings my little bell. I caught at that. Did it ring your bell yesterday evening while I was here and you went to the door? Twice. I see, said I, how your imagination misleads you. My eyes are on the bell, and my ears are open to the bell, and if I am a living man, it did not ring those times, no, nor at any other time except when it would run on the natural course of physical things by the station communicating with you. He shook his head. I have never made a mistake as that yet, sir. I have never confused the spectre's ring with the man. The ghost ring is a strange vibration in the bell that derives from nothing else, and I have not assisted that asserted that the bell stirs to the hour. I don't wonder that you failed to hear it, but I heard it. And did the spectre seem to be there when you looked out? It were there, both times, he repeated firmly, both times. Will you come to the door with me and look for it now? He bit his underlip as though it was somewhat unwilling, but arose. I opened the door and stood on the step, while he stood in the doorway. There was the danger light. There were the dismal mouth of the tunnel. There were the wet stone walls of the cutting. There were the stairs above them. Do you see it? I asked him, taking particular note of his face. His eyes were prominent and strained, but not very much more so, perhaps, than my own had been when I directed them earnestly towards the same spot. No, he answered, it is not there. Agreed, said I. We went in again, shutting the door, and returned to our seats. I was thinking how best to improve this advantage, if it might be called one, when he took up the conversation in such a matter-of-course way, so assuming there could be no serious questions in fact between us, I felt myself placed on the weakest of positions. By this time you will fully understand, sir, he said, that what troubles me so dreadfully is the question. What does the spectre mean? I was not sure, I told him, that I did not fully understand. What is it warning against? He said, ruminating with his eyes on the fire, and only by times turning them on me. What is the danger? Where is the danger? There is danger overhanging somewhere on the line. Some dreadful calamity will happen. It is not to be doubted. This third time after what has gone before. But surely this is a cruel haunting of me. What can I do? He pulled out his handkerchief and wiped the drops from his heated forehead. If I telegraph danger on either side of me or on both, I can give no reason for it, he went on, wiping the palms of his hands. I shall get into trouble and do no good. They would think I were mad. This is the way it would work. Message, danger, take care. Answer, what danger, where? Message, don't know. But for God's sake, take care. They would displace me. What else could they do? His pain and mine were most pitiable to see. It was the mental torture of a conscientious man oppressed beyond endurance by an unintelligible responsibility involved in life. When it first stood under the danger light, he went on, putting his dark hair back from his head and drawing his hands outward across his temples into an extremity of feverish distress. Why not tell me where the accident was to happen, if it must happen? Why not tell me how it could be averted, if it could have been averted? When on its second coming it hid its face, why not tell me instead she is going to die, and then keep her at home? If it come on these two occasions only to show me that its warnings were true, and so to prepare me for the third, why not warn me plainly now? And I, Lord help me, a mere poor signalman on this solitary station. Why not go to somebody with credit that he believed and power to act? When I saw him in this state, I saw that for the poor man's sake, as well as for the public safety, what I had to do for the time was to compose his mind. Therefore, setting aside all question of reality or unreality between us, I represented to him that whoever thoroughly discharged his duty must do well, and that at least it was his comfort that he had understood his duty, though he did not understand these confounding appearances. In this effort I succeeded far better than in the attempt to reason him out of his conviction. He'd become calm. The occupations incidental to his post, as the night advanced, began to make a larger demand on his attentions, and I left him at 2 in the morning. I had offered to stay through the night, but he would not hear of it. But I more than once looked back at the red light as I ascended the pathway. I did not like the red light, and that I should have slept but poorly in my bed had I been under it, I see no reason to conceal. Nor did I like the 2 sequences of the accident and the dead girl. I see no reason to conceal that either. But what ran most in my thoughts was the consideration how ought I to act, having become the recipient of this disclosure. I had proved the man to be intelligent, vigilant, painstaking and exact, but how long might he remain so in his state of mind? Though in a subordinate position, still he held the most important trust, and would I, for instance, like to stake my own life on the chances of his continuing to execute it with precision. Unable to overcome a feeling there would be something treacherous in my communicating what he had told me to his superiors in the company, without first being plain with himself and proposing a middle course to him, I ultimately resolved to offer to accompany him, otherwise keeping a secret for the present, to the wisest medical practitioner we could hear of in these parts, and to take his opinion. A change in his time of duty would come round next night, he had apprised me, and he would be off an hour or 2 after sunrise, and on again soon after sunset. I had appointed to return accordingly. Next evening was a lovely evening, and I walked out early to enjoy it. The sun was not yet quite down when I traversed the field paths near the top of the deep cutting. I would extend my walk for an hour, I said to myself, half an hour on and half an hour back, and it would then be time to go to my signalman's box. Before pursuing my stroll, I stepped down to the brink and nonchalantly and mechanically looked down from the point from which I had first seen him. I cannot describe the thrill that seized upon me when, close to the mouth of the tunnel, I saw the appearance of a man, with his left sleeve across his eyes, passionately waving his right arm. The nameless horror that oppressed me passed in a moment, for in a moment I saw this appearance of a man were a man indeed, and there were a little group of other men standing a short distance, to whom he seemed to be rehearsing the gesture he made. The danger light was not yet lighted. Against its shaft, a little low hut entirely new to me had been made of some wooden supports and tarpaulin. It looked no bigger than a bed. With an irresistible sense that something was wrong, with a flash and self-reproachful fear that fatal mischief had come out of my leaving the man there and causing no one to be sent to overlook or correct what he did, I descended the notched path with all the speed I could make. "What is the matter?" I asked the man. "Signalman killed this morning, sir." "Not the man belonged to that box?" "Yes, sir. Not the man I know." "You will recognize him, sir, if you knew him," said the man who spoke for others, solemnly uncovering his own head and raising the end of the tarpaulin, but his face is quite composed. "Ah, how did this happen? How did this happen?" I asked, turning from one to another, as the hut closed in again. "He was cut down by an engine, sir. No man in England knew his work better, but somehow he was not clear of the outer rail. It was just at broad day. He had struck the light and had the lamp in his hand, and the engine came out of the tunnel, his back was towards her, and she cut him down. That man drove her, and was showing how it happened. Show the gentleman, Tom." The man, who wore a rough dark dress, stepped back to his former place at the mouth of the tunnel. "Coming around the curve in the tunnel, sir," he said. "I saw him at the end like as if I saw him down a perspective glass. There were no time to check speed. I knew him to be very careful. As he didn't seem to take heed of the whistle I shot off. We were running down upon him. I called out to him as loudly as I could call." "What did you say?" "I said, 'Below there, look out, for God's sake, clear the way.'" I started. We're a dreadful time, sir. I never left off calling to him. I put this arm before my eye not to see, and I waved the arm to the last, but it was no use." Without prolonging the narrative to dwell on any one of its curious circumstances more than on any other, I may, in closing it, point out the coincidence that the warning of the engine driver included not only the words which the unfortunate signalman had repeated to me as haunting him, but also the words which myself, not he, had attached, and only in my own mind, to the gesticulation he had imitated. I should perhaps clarify here, for those listening. A couple of times I have said the phrase "God's sake, clear the way," in reference, while in reference to, the gesture of the arm. And it is true in this story that he is never spoken aloud by either character, but only the gesture, or how the narrator himself refers to the gesture. It is often thought that a ghost is the past haunting the future, or the present perhaps. A ghost is a thing that was, haunting that is, but not always. Not always. We read The Time Machine a while ago, and there they talk about how time itself might be seen as a physical dimension, if you think about it right. How a thing might move forward or backward through it, if only they had the right perspective. How always we are moving through it, at a fixed rate, falling and falling. But I know this not to be true as well. I know that time is not moving at a fixed rate. I know that it is relative. That some move faster and some slower. I don't know how I know this. But here I am, a thing at a time. Sometimes moving faster, sometimes moving slower. I will be again, I'm sure. Lamp tells me he can fix this. And perhaps I must be better at choosing my books in future. But I do not mind. It is a comfort to me. Quiet. Will I do the other one? Will I? There is another story here, and I was to read it. I was to read it, wasn't I? The Boy at Mugby. I was to read it, and why do I read anything? Why am I here? What is this? Where am I? What? What is... Lamp, there is... Lamp is here. He is so bright, so flickering bright. The moths go to him, go to his kind, and I see why. It would be nice to be warm. So often I am too warm. This place, it gets hot, and I am... Why is it cold? Why is it so cold? I would normally take water here. I do not think I could take water now. I would like to rest, but there are things to do. There is a book to read. I must read the book. There is a book to read. I must read the book. That's the thing. That is... There's a book to read. I must read the book. I must. The woods, quiet and the struggle. I must read the book. I must read. I must. The book. The book is the thing. Yes, I will read the book. I will read the book. And then the book will be read. This is. I will read the book, and the book will be read. This is good. That's who I am. That's it. Of course. How foolish. I am the boy at Mugby. That's about what I am. You don't know what I mean? What a pity. But I think you do. I think you must. Look here. I am the boy at what is called the refreshment room at Mugby Junction. And what's the proudest boast is that I never yet refreshed a mortal being. Up in a corner of the damn refreshment room at Mugby Junction, and they are at 27 cross straws. I've often counted them while they brush at the first class, hair 27 ways. Behind the bottles, among the glasses, Bounded on the northwest by the pier, stood pretty far to the right of the metallic object that's at times the tier and at times a soup tureen, according to the nature of the last twang imparted to its contents, which are the same groundwork. Fended off from the traveller by a barrier of stale sponge cake, erected at the top of the counter, and lastly exposed sideways to the glare of our Mrs. R. You ask a boy so situated next time you stop at an hurry at Mugby for anything to drink. You take a peek, you'll notice that it will try to seem not to hear you. It will appear in an absent manner to survey the line through a transparent medium composed of your head and body. They won't serve you as long as you can possibly bear it. That's me. What a lark it is. We are the model establishment. We are, at Mugby. Other refreshment rooms send their imperfect young ladies up to be finished off by our missus. For some of the young ladies, when they're in the business, come into it mild. Our missus, she soon takes that out of them. Why, I originally come into the business meet myself, but our missus, she soon took that out of me. What a delightful lark it is. I look upon refreshmenters as occupying the only proudly independent footing on the line. There's Papers, for instance, my honourable friend, if he will allow me to call him so, him as belongs to Smith's bookstall. Why, he no more dares to be up to our refreshment games than he dares to jump at the top of a locomotive with the steam at full pressure and cut away open alone, driving himself at limited nail speeds. Papers would get his head punched at every compartment, first, second and third, the whole length of the train, if he would venture to imitate my demeanour. It's the same with the porters, same with the guards, the same with the ticket clerks, same with the whole way up to the secretary, traffic manager, or very chairman. There ain't a one among them on the nobly independent footing as we are. Did you ever catch one of them when you wanted anything of him, making a system of surveying the line through the transparent medium composed of your head and body? I should hope not. You should see our bandolining room at Mugby Junction. It's led to by the door behind the counter, which you'll notice usually stands ajar, and it's the room where our missus and our young ladies bandoline their hair. You should see 'em at it, betwixt trains, bandolining away, as if they were anointing themselves for the combat. When you telegraphed, you should see their noses all growing up the scorn, as if it were part of the working of the same cook and whetstone electrical machinery. You should hear our missus give the word, "Here comes the beast to be fed," and then you should see him indignantly skipping across the line from the up to the down, or Warsaw, and began to pitch up the stale pastry into the plates, and chuck the sawdust sandwiches under the glass cover and get out the sherry. Oh, my eye, it's for your refreshments. It's only in the Isle of the Brave and Landed of the Free, by which of course I mean to say Britannia, that refreshmenting is so effective, so wholesome, so constitutional a check upon the public. There was a foreigner, which having politely with his hat off beseeched our young ladies and our missus for a little gloss of brandy, and having had the line surveyed through him by all and no other acknowledgment, was proceeding at last to help himself, as seems to be the custom in his own country, when our missus, with her hair almost coming unbandolined with rage and her eyes emitting sparks, flew at him, caught the decanter out of his hands and said, "Put it down, I won't allow that." And the foreigner, pale, stepped back with his arms stretched out in front of him, his hands clasped at his shoulder rings, and exclaimed, it is possible this is true the same, that these distinguished females and this ferocious old woman are placed here by the administration of to empoison the voyeurs with their phantom. Great heaven, how allows it, that English people, or is he then a slave, or an idiot? Another time, a mercy wide-awake American gent had tried the sawdust and spit it out, and had tried the sherry and spit that out, and had tried in vain to sustain exhausted matura upon the butterscotch, and had been rather extra bandolined, and line surveyed through them, when, as the bell was ringing and he paid our missus, he says very loud and good-tempered, "I tell you what, this ma'am, I laugh there. I laugh, I do. I have seen most things, for I hail from the unlimited side of the Atlantic Ocean, and I have travelled right slick over the limited, head on through Jerusalem in the east, and likewise France, Italy, and Europe, the old world. I am now upon the track to the chief European villages, that such an institution as you and your young ladies, yet fixed in solid and liquid afore the glorious tunnel, I would never see. And if I hadn't found the eighth wonder of monarchical creation in finding you and your young ladies and your fixed and solid and non-liquid, all as aforesaid, established in a country where the people are not absolute lunatics, I am extra loaded down with nip and frizzle to the innermost gate. Well, from there I laughed. I do, ma'am, I laugh." And so he went, stamping and shaking his sides along the platform, all the way to his own compartment. I think we were standing up again, the foreigner and I think it would stand up again the foreigners, give our missus the idea of going over to France, and drawing a comparison betwixt refreshment inn as followed among the frog eaters and refreshment inn as triumphed in the Isle of the Brave and Land of the Free, for which of course I mean to say again Britannia. Our young ladies, Miss Whiff, Miss Piff, and Miss Sniff, were unanimous opposed to her going, for as they says to our Mrs. One, and all is been known that henceforth the earth has no other nation except Britain has any idea of think above all business. Why then should you tie yourself to prove what is already proved? Our missus, however, being a taser at all points, stood out grim obstinate and got a return pass by South Eastern title to go right through, if such should be her disposition, I must say. Sniff is an husband to Mrs. Sniff, is a regular insignificant cove, looks after the sawdust department in back room, and is sometimes, when we are very hard put to it, let behind the counter with a corkscrew, but never when it can be helped. His demeanour towards the public being disgustingly servile. How Mrs. Sniff ever comes so far to lower herself as to marry him, I don't know, but I suppose he does, and I should think he wished he didn't, for he leads an awful life. Mrs. Sniff couldn't be much harder with him if he were a public. Similarly, Miss Whiff and Miss Piff, taking the tone of Mrs. Sniff, they shoulder Sniff about when he has met him with a corkscrew, and they whisk things out of his hand when he in civility is going to let the public have them, and they snap him up when in the cruel and baseness of his spirit he is going to answer a public question, and they drone more tears into his eyes than ever the mustard does, which he all along lays onto the sawdust. But it ain't strong. Once, when Sniff had the repulsiveness to reach across to get the milk pot to hand it over for a baby, I see our missus in her rage catch him by both his shoulders and spin him out of the bandolin room. But Mrs. Sniff, how different. She's the one, as you notice, will always be looking another way from you when you look at her. She's the one with the small waist bucked in tight front, and with the lace cuffs at her wrist, which she puts on the edges of the counter before her, and stands a smoothing while the public phones. This smoothing the cuffs and looking another way while the public phones is the last accomplishment taught the young ladies comes to Mugby to be finished by our missus. It's always taught by Mrs. Sniff. When our missus went away upon her journey, Mrs. Sniff was left in charge. She did hold the public in check most beautiful. In all my time I never see half so many cups of tea given without milk to people as wanted it with, nor half so many cups of tea with milk given to people as wanted it without. When foaming ensued, Mrs. Sniff would say, and you better settle it among yourselves and change with one another. It was a most highly delicious lark. I enjoyed the refreshment in business more than I ever, and was so glad I had took it when young. Our missus returned. It got circulated along the young ladies, and as it might be penetrated to me through the crevices of the bandolion room, that she had horrors to reveal, if revelation so contemptible would be dignified with the name. Agitation become awakened. Excitement was up in the stirrups. Expectation stood on tiptoe. At length it were put forth that on our slackest evening in the week, and at our slackest time of that evening betwixt trains, our missus would give her views of foreign refreshment in the bandolion room. It were arranged tasteful for the purpose. The bandolion table and glass were hidden in a corner, an armchair was elevated on a packing case for our missus' occupation, a table and a tumbler of water, no sherry in it, thank you, placed beside it. Two of the pupils, the season being autumn, and hollyhocks and dahlia being in, ornamented the wall with three devices in those flowers. On one might be read, "May Albion never learn," on another, "Keep the public down," on another, "Our refreshment in charter." The whole had a beautiful appearance, with which the beauty of the sentiments corresponded. On our Mrs. Brow wrote severity, as she ascended the fatal platform, not that there was anything new. Miss Whiff and Miss Piff sat at her feet. 3 chairs from the waiting room might have been perceived by average eye in front of her, on which the pupils was accommodated. Behind them, a very close observer might have discerned a boy, myself. "Where," said our missus, glancing ruefully around, "is Sniff?" "I thought it better," answered Mrs. Sniff, "that he should not be let to come in. He is such an ass." "No doubt," assented our missus, "but for that reason is it not desirable to improve his mind?" "Oh, nothing will ever improve him," said Mrs. Sniff. "However," pursued our missus, "call him in. Ezekiel?" I called him in. The appearance of the low-minded cove was hailed with disapprobation from all sides, on account of his having brought his corkscrew with him. He pleaded the force of habit. "The force," said Mrs. Sniff. "Don't let's have you talking about forces, for gracious sake. There, do stand still where you are, back against the wall." He's a smiling piece of vacancy, and he smiled in the mean way which you will smile at even the public if he gets a chance. Language could say no meaner of him, and he stooped up right near the door with the back of his head against the wall, as if he were waiting for somebody to come in and measure his height for the army. I should not enter, ladies, says our missus, on the revolting disclosure I am about to make, if it were not in the hope that it will cause you to be yet more implacable in the exercise of power you wield in a constitutional country, and yet more devoted to the constitutional motto which I see before me. It was behind her, but the words sounded better so. May Albion never learn. Here the pupils had made the motto, admired it, and cried, "Hear, hear, hear, hear." Sniff, showing an inclination to join in chorus, got himself frowned down by every brow. The baseness of the French, pursued our missus, as displayed in the fawning nature of their refreshment, equals, if not surpasses, anything as was ever heard of in the baseness of the celebrated Bonaparte. Miss Whiff, Miss Piff, and me, we drawed an heavy breath, equal to saying, "We thought as much." Miss Whiff and Miss Piff seemed to object to my drawing mine along with theirs. I drawed another to aggravate them. "Shall I be believed," says our missus with flashing eyes, "when I tell you that no sooner had I set my foot upon the treacherous shore—" Here Sniff, either busting in or mad, or thinking aloud, says in a low voice, "Faith, plural, you know." A carrion that came upon him when he was spurned by all eyes, added to his being beneath contempt, was sufficient punishment for a cove so grovelling. In the midst of a silence rendered more impressive by the turned-up female noses with which it was pervaded, our missus went on. "Shall I believe when I tell you that no sooner had I landed," this word with a killing look at Sniff, "on that treacherous store, than I was ushered to a refreshment room, where there were, I do not exaggerate, actual eatable things to eat." A groan burst from the ladies. I not only did myself the honour of joining, but also lengthening it out. "Where there were," our missus added, "not only eatable things to eat, but also drinkable things to drink." A murmur swelled almost into a scream, arising. Miss Piff, trembling with indignation, calls out, "Name!" "I will name," said our missus. "There were roast fowls, hot and cold. There was smoking roast veal, surrounded with brown potatoes. There was hot soup, which, again shall I be credited, nothing bitter in it, and no flour to choke off the consumer. There were a variety of cold dishes set off with jelly. There were a salad. There were, mark me, fresh pastry, and that of a light construction. There were a luscious show of fruit. There were bottles and decanters of sound small wine of every size and adapted to every pocket. The same osier statement will apply to brandy, and these were set out upon the counter so that all could help themselves." Our missus' lips so quivered that Miss Sniff, though scarcely less convulsed than she were, got up and held the tumbler to them. "This," proceeds our missus, "was my first unconstitutional experience. Well, it would have been if it had been my last and worst, but no. As I proceeded further into that enslaved and ignorant land, its aspect became more hideous. I need not explain to this assembly the ingredients and formation of the British refreshment sandwich." Universal laughter, except from Sniff, who was the sandwich cutter, shook his head in a state of the most dejection, as he stood with it against the wall. "Well," said our missus, with dilated nostrils, "take a fresh, crisp, long, crusty penny loaf made of the whitest and best flour. Cut it longwise through the middle. Insert a fair and nicely fitting slice of ham. Tie a smart piece of ribbon round the middle of the old thing to bind it together, and at one end a neat wrapper of clean white paper by which to hold it, and the universal French refreshment sandwich busts on your dismal vision." A cry of shame from all except Sniff, who rubbed his stomach with a soothing hand. "I need not," said our missus, "explain to this assembly the usual formation and fitting of the British refreshment room." No one laughter. Sniff again shaking his head in low spirits against the wall. "Well," said our missus, "what do you say to a general decoration of everything, to hangings, sometimes elegant, to easy velvet furniture, to an abundance of little tables, abundant little seats, to brisk bright waiters, to great convenience, to a pervading cleanliness and tastefulness positively addressing the public, and making the beast thinking itself worth the pains?" Contemptuous fury on the part of all the ladies, Mrs. Sniff looking as if she wanted somebody to hold her, and everybody else looking as if they'd rather not. "3 times," said our missus, working herself to a truly tremendous state, "3 times I did see these shameful things, only between the coast of Paris, and not climbing either, at Asbrook, at Arras, and Amiens. But worse remains. Tell me, what would you call a person who should propose in England there should be kept, say at our own modelled Mugby Junction, pretty baskets, each holding an assorted cold lunch and dessert, for a passenger power to take away, to empty the carriage at perfect leisure, and return at another station 50 or 100 miles further on? There were disagreement what such a person should be called, whether revolutionist, atheist, Bry, I said in, or an un-English. Miss P screeched her shrill opinion last, at the words, "A malignant maniac." "I adopt," says our missus, "the brand set upon such a person by the righteous indignation of my friend Miss Piff. A malignant maniac. Know then that malignant maniac has sprung from the congenial soil of France. and his malignant madness for unchecked action on the same part of my journey. I noticed that Sniff were rubbing his hands, and that Mrs. Sniff had got her eyes upon him. But I did not take a particular notice, only the excited stare in which the young ladies was, and a feeling myself called upon to keep it up with an owl. On my experience south of Paris, said our missus in a deep tone, I will not expatiate. Too loathsome were the tasks. But fancy this. Fancy a guard coming round with a train at full speed to inquire how many dinners. Fancy his telegraphing forward the number of dinners. Fancy everyone expected, and the table elegantly laid for the complete party. Fancy a charming dinner in a charming room, and the head cook concerned for the honour of every dish superintending in his clean white jacket and cap. Fancy the beast travelling 600 miles on end, very fast with great punctuality, yet being taught to expect this to be done for it. I spurned chorus of the beast. I noticed that Sniff was again rubbing his stomach with the soothing hand, and he had drawn up one leg. But again I didn't take particular notice, looking on myself as I called upon to stimulate public feeling, it being a lark besides. Putting everything together, said our missus, French refreshment, it comes to this, and oh, it comes to a nice total. First, eatable things to eat and drinkable things to drink. A groan from the young ladies, kept up by me. Second, convenience and even elegance. Another groan from the young ladies, kept up by me. Third, moderate charges. This time a groan from me, kept up by the young ladies. Fourth, and here, says our missus, I claim your angriest sympathy, attention, common civility, nay, even politeness. Me and the young ladies regularly raging mad altogether. And I cannot, in conclusion, says our missus, with her spiteful sneer, give you a completer picture of that despicable nation, after which I have related, then assuring you that they wouldn't bear our constitutional ways and noble independence at Mugby Junction for a single month, and they would turn us to the right about and put another system in our place as soon as look at us, perhaps sooner, for I do not believe they have the good taste to care to look at us twice. The swelling tune-up were arrested in its rise. Sniff bore away by his servile disposition, had dawed up his leg with an higher and higher relish, and were now discovered to be waving his corkscrew over his head. But at this moment that Mrs. Sniff, who had kept her eye upon him like on the fabled obelisk, descended on our victim. Our missus followed them both out, and cries were heard in the sawdust apartment. You come in the damn refreshment room at the junction, making believe that you don't know me, and I'll point you out with my right thumb over my shoulder, which is our missus, and which is Mrs. Whiff, and which Miss Piff, and which is Mrs. Sniff. You won't get a chance to see Sniff, because he's disappeared that night. Whether he perished or tore to pieces, I cannot say. But his corkscrew alone remains to bear witness to the servility of his disposition. I read the book. The book has been read. Am I the boy at Mugby Junction? It says I'm the boy at Mugby Junction, yeah? Maybe I'm the boy at Mugby Junction. Could I be the boy at Mugby Junction? I don't think I'm the boy at Mugby Junction. If I'm not the boy at Mugby Junction, then who am I? What's that? Oh, hello, lamb. You're so bright. You're so warm. I'd like to be warm. It's cold here. What's that? I should go to bed. Maybe I should go to bed. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Maybe I should go. What's happening? What's going on? What's that? Oh, something was wrong there. Something was very badly wrong there. Oh, I am alive again. I am very warm and I'm not sure I like it anymore. Lamp, what happened? Okay, so, hello everyone. You can't hear it because you can't hear Lamp because he talks in my head. But Lamp is now yelling at me very, very loudly, and I can't think very clearly. But I am in trouble because apparently I was not allowed to die, and was I dead? Was I actually dead? Lamp, what happened? I brought back a book lamp, and I thought it was safe. I ran it by you. You said it wasn't. Was I dead? Did I die? Am I alive? Lamp, what has happened? Lamp, what's going on? I don't understand. I don't. I could feel my breath in my lungs. Oh God. Oh Lord Nevin, I did not like that. I did not like that. Hello? I can't. Abby's yelling and I can't think and I don't know what happened. The boy at Mugby Junction, right? British food is bad and that's deliberate. We do it on purpose as a joke. I'm not British. What? I'm a rat. What? Who am I? Lamp. What? Goodbye. Goodbye, Tara. Thank you for.